This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic. But today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA, from growing the cotton to adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say, ahoy, or land ho, and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad, and we're not dead, and your feed is not broken.
Correct.
Not yet, anyway.
So it's been a little while, but you were busy. You were out in L.A. before it caught on fire.
Yeah, it's hard for us to record when we're on opposite coasts because we do this late in the evening, and usually when I'm traveling, especially on the West Coast, when it's 10 o'clock here for Dan, it'll be 7 o'clock for me, and I'm usually right in the middle of stuff because I'm usually with companies doing something, and so I'm usually having some fancy dinner somewhere.
And it's also like a couple weeks to Christmas now, so the year is winding down. Everybody's trying to get everything finished. It's a really busy time. So
yeah, so that's Dan's way of saying he had a bunch of projects to do that kept us from doing this over the weekend.
Yeah, and I'm kind of ignoring some things right now to do this one, but this is so much more important because
it absolutely is.
The people, they need us.
Yes.
Yeah, so you went out. We'll get to what we're driving, but you actually you did like the grand tour of LA while you were out there.
Oh, man, I did so. I had three different flights, 3 different round trip flights in the last week and a half. I went to LA, and then while I was in LA, I bopped up to San Francisco for a day, and then back to LA that night. And then I was back out in the Bay Area earlier this week when I flew out on Sunday and then went up to Petaluma to shoot a spot with Leo Laporte from the Twit Network with the new 2018 Nissan Leaf, which we'll talk about later. And that's going to be on this weekend's new Screensavers show. And then Leo also had me on the panel for the Twitch show, This Week in Tech, which was an amazing experience with Leo and Christina Warren and Brianna Wu. And it was a lot of fun. And if you haven't seen that, I'll put the link in the show notes, and it was episode 643, and it was a lot of fun to do.
Episode 643. That's so many episodes. I mean, we had the Autoblog podcast
for 13, almost 13 years now. Yeah, started in early 2005.
Right, and I was just gonna say, I think I was all excited to try to do something for Autoblog podcast number 500, and I just I didn't make it. But that was another one. Like I think we picked that up in 2007. I think we wound up as the crew on that show.
Yeah,
maybe 2006, something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah. The Autoblog podcast originally started in, I think, in late 05 or early 06, and went for about a year and a half, and then went on hiatus for a while before you and Shunk and I picked it up and ran with it again, and it's kept going ever since. Yeah,
that's just
at least in some form or another.
Yeah, I mean, they're still going. I guess they're taking a break for the holiday, which, I mean, they're allowed to do that. So,
well, we already had our break, so let's dive into this.
Yeah, all right. So you were driving while you were out there, besides the Leaf, which we'll get to, but you had the CX-5, and this is not the CX-5 that we all kind of fell in love with a few years ago. This is a new CX-5.
Yeah, so this was the 2018 CX-5, which we actually debuted last year at the LA Auto Show, and went on sale a few months ago here in the U.S. And in a few more months, it'll actually be available finally with a diesel engine, a new 2.2 liter diesel engine that Mazda has developed and is hopefully finally close to being certified. But in the meantime, it's available now with a 2.5 liter gas engine, and it basically takes everything we loved about the original CX-5 and just makes it a little better. I mean, it's all the qualities of the original are still there, and it still drives great. And like other modern Mazdas, it has a really nice interior, really well executed interior, especially given the price point. So it's a fantastic vehicle.
Well, styling wise, they brought it more in line with the CX-9, which is very handsome.
Yeah, absolutely. They've kind of smoothed it out a little bit, the design language. So it's still, the same kind of Kodo design language they've been using for the last generation of cars, but it's, a little more refined, and looks a little more premium, a little more upscale. And, they've taken this, at the LA show, they showed the updated 2018 Mazda 6 sedan as well. It takes on some of those same qualities.
Yeah, and the 6 it's a beautiful car. Here's the issue I have with both the CX-5 and the 6. I wind up forgetting them a lot, and I don't mean to, because I actually really like them, and I like that Mazda is a company that is passionate about cars that drive well. They're passionate about the things that we're passionate about, and I think that's wonderful. But when people ask me about cars in particular segments where Mazda has an offering, I kind of always forget to mention that there's a Mazda until like 10 minutes later. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's a Mazda there. That's actually like all the other things I suggested. Just try the Mazda. Because
that's where you and I differ, because I usually start with the Mazda. If there's a Mazda in the segment that they're interested in, that the Mazdas and Hondas are usually where I start, and then it goes off from there.
So maybe I'll just start forcing myself to think, is there a Mazda in this segment? Because they offer cars that are really good, and I don't want there to not be good cars.
Yeah, so, the driving dynamics of the CX-5, in the among compact crossovers, it probably has, I would say, it arguably has the best driving dynamics of any of them that are on the, and especially of mainstream models that are out there right now. It's got a really, supple ride. So it absorbs bumps really well, but it's got great body control. Nice tight steering. It's what we've come to expect of Mazda. And it all fits in with that tagline of theirs that driving matters. And Mazda will probably be one of the last brands we see adopt automated driving systems. Just because they want to build cars for people that actually want to drive them. And I applaud that. And, sadly, that's a diminishing portion of the population, but, it's just the way it is. But, hopefully they'll be able to stick it out there, and, with their relationship with Toyota now, where Toyota took a stake in Mazda, and Mazda's got a small shareholding in Toyota, and they're sharing some technology. Hopefully that will be enough to help them survive and thrive going forward for many years to come.
Yeah, well, once all the automatons are, I was going to say off the road, but I guess it's actually on the road.
But they're not driving, and they're not hogging the left lane. Right.
There's maybe the ones who make it through this gap, right? By saying, no, we're a traditional vehicle. There'll be a resurgence because there'll be one of the few left. And there'll be a core group of people that still wants that if it's legal.
Yeah, maybe instead of having dedicated lanes on the road for autonomous vehicles, maybe instead what we need is dedicated lanes on the road for Mazdas and other similar vehicles.
I'm sure you could sell dedicated lanes on the road to the highest bidder without any problem. I doubt that Mazda would actually be the winner there, but
but we can give it a shot.
Yeah, so it drove well.
Save the manuals. We can give a lane to Mazda.
That's actually a good question. Can you get the CX-5 with it? Because you used to be able to get it with a manual. Can you still get it with the 2.2?
No. Yeah. No, not anymore. It's automatics only now. But what are you going to do? You got to sell what customers are going to buy. And, so that means more and more crossovers and various types of, various flavors of utilities. Arguably, those could be even considered the modern station wagon. We'll get into that a little more, but
yeah.
Right now, the CX-5, if what you're interested in is a compact crossover with a really nicely executed interior, great driving qualities, you really can't do a whole lot better than the CX-5. The one flaw in the ointment is that it doesn't support Android Auto and Apple CarPlay yet. So you still have, the standard Mazda interface, which granted is not a bad interface.
But I was just going to say, it's not terrible. Most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they do, it has a touchscreen, but it also has a central controller, like an iDrive MMI style controller on the center console, which actually makes it quite easy to get, precise control, and you can flick back and forth through the menus very quickly. With that, without having to reach out, you can do it with your finger on the screen, but, then you just get fingerprints all over the screen. It's much better to just use the knob.
Yeah. Well, and it's another lesson that we've seen Mazda to sort of pick up some of the lessons from the Germans. They build sort of modern executions of what you'd find in like BMWs and Audis in the 80s and 90s, in my opinion. Like, if you really liked your E36, you'll like a Mazda 6. The infotainment system in the cars is kind of limited, and I think that's good because it makes it streamlined to use, because it doesn't have the fingerprint recognition kind of thing. It does have a couple of ways to input or to provide inputs, which is smart. But I think that using that system is a really good lesson in how you make it do less and it works better.
Yeah, absolutely. And aside from the one time, several years ago when I was first driving a current generation Mazda 3, when the system actually crashed on me while I was driving down the road. Other than that, I've never really had a problem with it. It's always been fairly responsive and reliable.
Yeah, I've had systems crash. I can't remember what crashed on me most recently. I think it was actually the Uconnect in my own Jeep, but I've had other systems in other automakers' cars crash as well. It's weird because they just like freeze up and keep hitting the thing, and it's like nope. In
the case of what happened in the 3 several years ago, it actually just reset itself. It started from scratch. It rebooted the whole system.
That's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
You see the little C: prompt and anyway.
Well, no, it wasn't. It didn't go that far. I mean, it came up with the Mazda splash screen.
Oh,
so you don't see it. There's no command line.
It's all hidden behind the.
Wasn't quite that bad.
Yeah. Well, let's just move on because I don't want to start talking about putting these things.
So what did you drive?
Mode. So I had a couple of things. I had the 2017 Hyundai Ioniq hybrid. There's a couple of different flavors of Ioniq, so I had the hybrid, and it came right after I had a Prius Prime. So it was a really good kind of combination to have one and then the other. And the Ioniq is a very direct assault on the Prius territory. It has that highly optimized aero shape. It's a dedicated model in the lineup. It's following the Prius playbook pretty closely. But it's not a
except
Prius.
For one minor detail.
And what's that?
It's not hideous.
That's true. And that's actually, a good point is the Ioniq is a dedicated hybrid that doesn't have that kind of weird to it. It's a dedicated hybrid that just is a normal car. and you can actually get down with it if you like cars too. Where the Prius, I liked the Prius Prime especially, but it's harder to love from a pure like dynamic standpoint. It's better, but it's a Prius. And it was interesting because I praised the Prius Prime for its dynamics the last episode. The Ioniq is much better. It feels sharper. It is more disciplined in its ride and body motions. It actually feels sportier, which is a really interesting contrast because it's not all that sporty.
But it does feel that way. It's got it's got pretty tight handling characteristics. Good ride quality, and the nature of the powertrain in the Ioniq. Because they're using a 1.6 liter GDI paired with a dual clutch transmission, a 6-speed dual clutch transmission, or is it 7?
I don't know, but either way,
it's a dual clutch transmission, right? So it doesn't have. You never get that. Even when the engine's running, you don't get that motoring. The motorboating feel that you get with a Prius. So you don't because it's a traditional step ratio transmission. As you accelerate, when the engine's on, you feel the revs climb, and then it shifts gears and climbs again. So it doesn't just go up and stay at one constant speed and drone there until the vehicle catches up.
Well, it's interesting. That is one of the things that I've really, really liked more about the Ioniq. I like that. It's a big deal. It makes a huge difference. It feels more refined. Maybe it's to me because it's what I'm used to, but you don't have the engine sort of wailing away. And the Prius isn't bad again, but when you get in the Ioniq that just does it a different way, it's an interesting contrast, I suppose. And I really found that the Ioniq did it the way that, more quote unquote normal cars do it. And I found that to be a lot more pleasing. It just feels better tuned overall. And the biggest difference besides the mechanical stuff, which was really pleasant to drive, is the ergonomics. Like the Prius Prime has terrible ergonomics. It has that damn screen and stuff. Like there's a shifter, like a real shifter in this car, in the Ioniq. There's like buttons for HVAC. It's just so much easier to use.
There's an instrument cluster where it's supposed to be in front of the driver, and then a normal center screen with that actually does support Apple Android Auto and CarPlay. So
and Hyundai infotainment is good. And it's much better.
Even the stock system, even if you don't use your smartphone, the stock system is one of the better systems out there.
Yeah. So it's a hatchback. It's roomy. It was well appointed because I had the Limited, so it's a pretty nice car. The one fly in the ointment, I think we used that phrase before in the podcast, so it's stuck in my head. But anyway, the one sort of sticking point was I did not get the fuel economy that it said that I would be getting, which was a little disappointing.
What did you get?
I got about 40, I want to say like 43. It was mid to low 40s. And it's supposed to get like 58 combined. So that felt a little off. And I think that's been sort of a consistent criticism of the Ioniq from other quarters, other corners of the internet, which is everything there is true. So
of course. Yeah. I mean, what could possibly, who would say anything untruthful on the internet?
Yeah.
But I did get like 52 out of the Ioniq. Was the temperature particularly cold this week when you had it?
No, I mean, it sort of fluctuated. It might have been just maybe I was driving it like an animal because it's not that bad to drive. I don't know. So, okay. It's one of those things, like, it was just curious to me because, I'll get in a Prius, and that's the one thing I will say for the Prius is, like, you get in it, it doesn't matter how you drive it. It hits that window sticker number from my experience.
That is true. It does do a remarkably good job of tuning out whatever the driver does and just gets whatever it's set up to do.
And I found its sport mode was actually really pretty good. Or like, because you could bat the shifter over to like S mode and get a little bit more responsiveness out of it. This is a hybrid that you can drive and enjoy driving because it's good to drive, not because you're some sort of like smug gas sipping, conspicuous consumption conservationist. It's a good car. I do wonder how well they're going to do against the Prius. It has such a head start about being this unique thing. But they have the opportunity here, so they can try to push it.
Well, yeah, and the interesting thing that Hyundai Motor Group actually, because including Kia, did is they developed this platform specifically for electrified models. So they have the Ioniq available as currently as both a hybrid and a battery electric model, at least in some states. And then there's also a plug-in hybrid that should be launching right about now, which basically is the regular hybrid, but with a bigger battery and a plug, to get you about 27 miles of electric range, all electric range. And then the same thing goes for the Nero, which is the same vehicle but with a quote unquote crossover body style, which is actually more of a slightly tall station wagon. But again, we'll get to that later.
And I did sort of make a mental note. Of the between the Nero and the Ioniq, I liked the Ioniq better. I thought it's just a better use of the platform. It's car-like and you can go back and forth about which you like better. It kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like pick the one you think looks better. I don't know. But yeah,
but if you look at the sales numbers, the reality is the Nero is actually selling quite a bit better.
Yeah, so that's fine. I'm sure Hyundai doesn't really care, or Hyundai Motor Group, like you're saying.
Well, yeah, Hyundai Motor, the parent company probably doesn't care so much, but I think the executives at Hyundai, because Hyundai Motor, their marketing team, is separate from the Kia marketing team, and
that's right.
So they are quite competitive with each other.
Yeah, well, they can have their sibling rivalry. Either way, they have a decent set of hardware to work from. And the other thing I was driving last week, because this was 2 weeks ago, I had the Ioniq. I was driving a Mitsubishi Outlander SEL. And Mitsubishi's in this tough spot. They don't get a ton of respect, but I actually found like it's pretty good in the cheap seats with this. It's definitely, it's not, the smoothest and the most refined vehicle, but Mitsubishi's making the best of what they have. And the Outlander is kind of the 21st century expression of the family station wagon. And an SEL trim is as fancy as you're going to get it. And it's a really good deal. And if you start going down the list of features, it's pretty well equipped. Now it feels like like the basic car was designed in the 90s and they've just kept putting the features in wherever they fit. So maybe that's part of why I wound up actually kind of impressed with it, because you walk away and you're like, oh yeah, right. That reminds me of like my Volvo 240 that was designed in the 60s and they built it till the 90s and they kept just stuffing crap where they could find places for it. So you had like relays behind the driver's dead pedal and like,
really
weird switches. Oh yeah, that's where the 240, the intermittent wiper relay, and there's another relay that are tucked behind the dead pedal, which is just this like metal bracket. And if the windshield leaks, that relay will fill with water and then you won't have any wipers. So you have to, because it's in there upside down usually. So you have to go and like pull the carpet back, remove the dead pedal, pull the relays out, turn them upside down, dry them out. So, and the 240 windshield always leaks because the body shell was designed in 1960 something for the 140. So anyway, completely aside, the Outlander is, it's 3 rows. An SEL trim. It has leather seats. It has a pretty mediocre Rockford Fosgate audio system. This one didn't have nav, which I was a little surprised about. But again, there's like another upgrade you can make for it. It's it's like a small footprint, but it has that occasional third row like the old family station wagon would. So you can use it that way. You definitely have no cargo room if you use that third row, but it has all the stuff. It's easy to drive. It actually surprisingly drives pretty well. Like its ride and handling are well tuned. It's definitely not the stiffest, most sort of road hugging platform, I guess, but it didn't embarrass itself. It felt like cars from 15 or 20 years ago that were decent. So it's apparently it still keeps winning IIHS top safety pick and stuff like that for its segment. So it's hard to argue with a car that's got all that stuff and all-wheel drive for like $32,000. It's a really good deal.
So at least it has something going for it.
Well, I mean, what I was really the most impressed with was it has a 2.5 liter, I don't know. See, now I'm gonna embarrass myself. I think it has a 2.5 liter 4-cylinder, 2.5 or 2.4, I forget. 2.4, and a CVT. Now that on the surface, that sounds like an awful conversation. I mean, it sounds terrible because it has been terrible. It was surprisingly lively and very well behaved. I think there's a pretty new iteration of whatever Jatco CVT they're using, and they've managed to make it not suck in this generation. It just gets out of the way. It cruises along on the highway. It feels way more energetic if you give it the spurs. Like there's a level of power there. It's not sluggish. There's a description I have not heard about a Mitsubishi Outlander in many years. Yeah, I was shocked, and maybe I was not on any substances this whole week. It was just like again, it's sort of a nondescript car in a nondescript segment. It competes with one automaker, and that's Subaru. And here's the thing, though: Subaru just released their Ascent 3-row. They don't have anything with 3 rows, and while that's probably a little bit bigger, and it's actually quite a bit bigger, right. The Ascent is pretty massive, right? So this isn't that big. This is Dodge Journey size, and it's I think it's actually some of the same basic stuff, but the Outlander I think has been evolved past the Journey sort of parts sharing. But it's got stuff. And it fits your life. Like it's not a car for people who really care about cars, but I was surprised at how much I actually didn't mind driving it, and how if I bent it into a curve with some anger, it was like, oh, okay, we're doing this. And it was very obedient. The limits aren't high, but they also it wasn't sloppy. Like I've found some Subarus that aren't the WRX or the STI are just a mess dynamically. This wasn't like that, and it was surprising because it's like, well, this is like kind of an old crock that they've just updated over and over again, and it's still like it's all right. So, I mean, I don't know. I was surprised. I was most surprised by how well behaved the transmission and engine combo was, and how non-sluggish it felt, because I expected it to just be like, oh, okay, here we go. We've got a week of just droning engine and no acceleration. Nope, it's not like that. It does its thing, and it does it quite well. So, well, I guess, if what you'd like is, something that can haul your family around, and you want something new, with a warranty on it, and, you've got a relatively limited budget. I mean, $32,000 is not cheap, but, compared to what you would, the pricing for a lot of its competitors, which can easily get well into the $40,000 range and beyond. It's not the worst choice in the world. No, it's fine. I mean, again, you're going to cross shop this probably with a Forester, or I'm trying to think of what else. Let's put it this way. It could be a SsangYong. Yeah. Mitsubishi has this sort of bottom feeder reputation, right? Like if you have a Pulse, you can get financed and you can get yourself a Mitsubishi. It's so fine, but also it's not really a penalty, at least as a new car. I don't know longevity wise what you're up against with this, but it's not full of super fancy gadgetry like you might find in, say, a Ford. That's, I'm thinking like the Escape, but the Escape has a sort of like another tier of sophistication to it, just because it's a newer platform, it has newer features, it has more tech, and it's done a different way. This is a little bit more of an old school kind of setup, and we're spending a little too much time on it now.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it's a family wagon, and that's I think that brings us to an interesting point of like the family wagon is sort of morphed into the nondescript mediocre crossover, which is kind of exactly what this is.
Yeah, and we've both talked at length over the years about how we often prefer station wagons over sedans or other body styles, because we like to have the dynamic qualities of a car over a sport utility vehicle, but like to have that bit of extra utility with that room in the back, having the big tailgate in the back, that makes it easier, when you've got to haul a load from Costco or from Home Depot or wherever, or, you find something that you really didn't need, but was ridiculously cheap at a yard sale. You could
like a Mitsubishi. Sorry. Carry on.
You can just throw it in the back. You can throw, a couple of bales of straw in there, whatever you want. And station wagons are great for that. Unfortunately, Americans seem to, over the last 15 years, have, completely gone away from, with the exception of automotive journalists, at least, have completely gone away from buying traditional station wagons.
I have faith, though. I have faith. Wagons are going to come back.
Maybe, the Buick Regal might bring them back. But, so the thing is, with wagons going away, it's, what do you get as an alternative? When my wife and I got rid of our Jetta TDI sport wagon earlier this year, we decided that, because nobody else was offering a wagon, we were going to go with a hatchback of some sort, a compact hatchback. And so we ended up with a Honda Civic. But, there are other options. And, while I was spending several hours in a Nissan Leaf earlier this week with Jason Torchinsky from Jalopnik, one of the multitude of topics that came up was, the state of the modern station wagon. And Jason came up with a very interesting concept. As you mentioned, the station wagon has kind of morphed into, what we call a crossover utility vehicle these days. And so Jason's got a very interesting definition for what qualifies as a station wagon versus a hatchback or some other body style.
See, now I thought Jason's definition of a wagon would be there's a trunk up front and a trunk in back and an engine underneath, which is the type 3. Anyway,
yeah,
moving on.
That is not a station wagon. That is a van.
No,
the way Jason describes the station wagon is it has, 4 doors and a tailgate. But to distinguish the wagon from a car or from a hatchback, it has to have, a third window on the side, so a rear quarter window behind the rear door. And the roof must extend back far enough that it covers more than half of the cargo area. So, for example, if you look at the Civic hatchback, the Civic hatchback has a very sloping rear tailgate. And so the roof basically ends, right behind, right behind the rear seat backs. Whereas, for example, if you look at this Outlander, the roof line goes far enough back that it covers more than half of the cargo area. Another example of what would qualify as a station wagon versus a hatchback is the Hyundai Elantra GT, because if you look at it, it's got a more vertical rear tailgate and the roof extends back. Granted, it's compared to what we traditionally think of as a station wagon, it's a relatively short cargo area.
Yeah, see,
it does fit that definition.
But then, and it's not a bad definition, but where does that leave cars like the Cadillac CTS-V wagon, which it has wagon in the name, but it's got such a tiny cargo area. I don't know if you were to get out the measuring tape, if that roofline actually does extend halfway or less.
Well, personally, I think, if any automaker that's going to have the gumption to at least call their car a wagon, I think we should, just grandfather them in and give them credit for that.
Give them a pass.
Yeah. If they're willing to call it a wagon, fine, we'll go with it. But
whatever you say.
In the absence of vehicles that are actually badged as station wagons, then I think Jason's definition works pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with the fact that a lot of these crossovers are basically, because they're car based, they're unibody.
Yeah,
they're not made on truck hardware. And I think that one of the reasons why I like wagons so much is because they have the utility that I want. I don't need a truck. If I needed a truck, I'd get a truck. I don't want to haul around a frame and a traditional four-wheel drive system or just a more heavy-duty all-wheel drive system like a truck. I don't want a solid rear axle. I don't want those things. They have their place, and that's not my usage case. So it's just inefficient, and there's a lot of penalties for going with such an old school kind of design. So
let me ask you this. Your Grand Cherokee is a unibody design.
Yeah.
Not technically a truck.
No.
Would you call it a station wagon or even an SUV for that matter?
I'd call it an SUV. It's definitely because and this is where you get into that, like those gray areas, right? But the Cherokee that preceded it was like the original XJ Cherokee, and that wasn't the original when you had that. But anyway, the XJ, the first modern unibody. Well, actually, I guess the Range Rover, the original Range Rover was a unibody, wasn't it? Yeah, but that was. I mean, that's
the vehicle that is generally considered to have kicked off the modern SUV boom. Was, as you said, the XJ Cherokee of 1984. I think it came out.
Yeah, I think it came out in '84. But that was definitely unibody. And so from there, the XJ's replacement was the ZJ, which became the Grand Cherokee, and they kept selling them both alongside each other. So the XJ sort of established that unibody SUV thing. And you saw other competitor SUVs quickly rush to market, right? Like the S10 and the Bronco 2. Those were truck based, and they paid some penalties for it. And the XJ is no sort of like paragon of lightweight or efficiency either, or good packaging. Like it was what they had, and it worked surprisingly well. And it became a thing. It became popular. But all those sort of first generation ones, you paid the penalty. They were trucky. Even the XJ, the ZJ, the first Grand Cherokee was like this quantum shift towards something that was very much more luxurious and smooth and car-like. And you had a lot of people replacing their cars with that Grand Cherokee. And especially in '92, when that Grand Cherokee came out, there were a lot of luxury car buyers that were flipping into the Jeep. And that really sort of took off. Whereas the Grand Wagoneer had been the luxury Jeep that was sharing garage space with Mercedes and Volvo and BMW. Now it was the Grand Cherokee. And that snowballed to the point where now they've taken the solid rear axle out of it. It's got fully independent suspension, but it's definitely an SUV because the Jeep in particular has serious off-road chops, which I never use. but you look at the way it's built and you look at what's under it and you go, okay, this is more than just like a platform that's shared between a sedan and this crossover thing with another drive shaft that runs back to of occasional use rear differential off of front wheel drive sort of transverse powertrain. Like that's not what it is. And that works fine. And that can also make a decent SUV. Like you see stuff like the RAV4, and you get the RAV4 equipped the right way. I think that's sort of like a pseudo SUV too. So whatever. But yeah, I would call the Cherokee an SUV, although you could make the argument that it's a crossover in usage, at least. I definitely use it like a crossover.
Okay, fair enough.
I talked in circles enough on that one. So I wouldn't call its competitors SUVs. I wouldn't call an Edge an SUV. That's a total crossover. I would not,
absolutely. And because of its sloping rear tailgate, it's not even a wagon.
No. Stuff like the Traverse. So that's a good point, though. The Traverse now.
That one I think could qualify as a wagon.
It's all right. I think we've talked in circles enough about wagons. I think though, to sort of go with the sort of the very progressive, free to be you and me kind of thing. A wagon is whatever you want it to be. Because why not?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's open to interpretation. All right.
Yeah.
So while you were out driving with Jason and doing other things, you also took in the LA Auto Show.
Yeah. So actually, I was before heading to Napa for the Leaf. I spent several days in Los Angeles and a day in San Francisco, and the LA Auto Show week kind of kicked off with Lincoln unveiling the new Nautilus, which is actually just a refresh of the old MKX.
Yeah, and a
good refresh though.
Yeah, no, I mean it's fun. The name is good. I actually really like the name, especially if they can get some like SSN 571 kind of Easter eggs kicking around it. But it's still like even updated. It's the MKX, and like that was okay, but it's still very 40. Does it stand out anymore with the upgrade as a Lincoln? That's something unique.
Yeah, I think so. The MKX now I think pretty much completes the lineup, having this new Lincoln grille that we first saw on the MKZ and Continental. Actually, we first saw it on the Continental Concept a couple of years back, and it's now spread across the entire lineup because the MKC has also received the updated grille. But the MKC, for now at least, retains its name. I think the other thing that is perhaps more interesting about this update for the 2019 model is that it actually has a name. It's Lincoln. Kumar Galhotra, the president of Lincoln Motor Company, confirmed while we were out there that yes, going forward, Lincoln is dropping the MK blank nomenclature, so there will be no more MKs. Going forward, everything is going to have a real name of some sorts. So we've already got the Continental, and I mean the Navigator always had its name. That was the one model that always bucked the trend.
Well, it's kind of like
the Escalade has at Cadillac.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say. It was interesting last week to read the story about how this came about, where it was actually a Lincoln executive being in an airport shuttle, talking to some other fellow travelers and saying, what do you drive? And it
was with his wife. It was Robert Parker, who's head of marketing for Lincoln Utilities.
Yeah.
He's the marketing manager, and he was in the airport, the parking lot shuttle, with his wife, and they were arguing over what the name of their vehicle was, whether it was an MKC or an MKZ.
I thought it was another couple that he was.
No, it was his wife.
Well, and if that's and I'm sure they were both each convinced, like, damn it, no, we have this one, and like that. But that's that's a really good point. It's just like you put in these naming conventions that even we as journalists mess up. Like I was talking on Twitter about it. People forgot about the MKT first of all. Other than fleets, nobody buys them.
Yeah,
and just it
was forgotten for reasons that go well beyond its name.
It looks like Moby Dick, but beyond that, I think it's a good move to bring names back, not because I want to cling to nostalgia or history, but they've got some names with some equity, Continental, Town Car, even. Those are good names. Why not establish another name? Yeah. Although I think that while some Lincoln buyers are very old, any of them who actually remember the Zephyr phone.
Well, actually, the Zephyr was with us more recently for a single model year.
Yeah.
What we now know is the MKZ actually launched in 2006 as the Zephyr. And then just a year later, they dropped that and changed it to MKZ for reasons that still remain not entirely clear. But fortunately, they will be going back. The MKZ and the MKC remain the last two with that kind of branding. And both of those are nearing the end of their life cycle in the next year or two. So, again, Kumar Gohatra explained that, they've got limited marketing budgets, to work with this stuff. And it actually costs quite a bit of money to establish a new brand name. So, for this year, they're focusing on the Nautilus. We've already got Continental. I mean, Continental was a name that I think everybody still remembered, but, and Navigator was always there. But they're focusing on the Nautilus this year. And then probably next year is when the new MKZ will arrive with a new name. And, sometime around then as well, sometime probably in 2019 or so, we'll see a next generation MKC with a name that is yet to be determined.
So they're not going to bring back like Aviator or anything like that?
That's entirely possible. And in fact, what we might see, there has been speculation that they'll bring back the Aviator name, which, existed on a Lincoln badged version of the Explorer back in the 1990s. Yeah. In the late 90s
and 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that one may well come back. If it wouldn't be a surprise, given, Ford has talked about introducing like 4 or 5 new SUV nameplates but between now and 2020. And, at least a couple of those are expected to be Lincolns. So the, a new Aviator based on the next generation Explorer, which is also due in the next couple of years. Ford has a lot of stuff due in the next couple of years. They've been slacking a little bit of late, but anyway, that one may get the Aviator name, or it may get something else entirely. We don't know yet.
Well, they're also doing a marketing shakeup, from what I understand, at Lincoln, which is probably going to help them, because one of the problems they've had is determining what they stand for. And I know I come at things with a marketing and advertising kind of focus. I'm sorry, but car ads in general are really tough right now, because what used to work doesn't, and yet you still kind of have to do it. And you've got to, people have a different relationship to their cars now. So that Lincoln has to kind of stake out territory, and they haven't been good at it over the last few years. I mean, they've had these weird ads with Matthew McConaughey, and before that, just really completely forgettable milquetoast stuff. But they have an opportunity as part of their model renaming to get out there, because even if it's the same vehicle, right? Like the Nautilus is really the MKX, but it's a new name. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you can get somebody's attention with that you couldn't get with the old name, that's a new car, and they might give it a new chance. And it gives you something to talk about anyway. So I know that part of their effort is to figure out how to market the cars better, and that might help them no matter what they're
I mean, Lincoln's actually been making quite a surprising amount of progress in the last few years, and especially in China. They've grown from nothing to about 60,000 sales this year in just 3 years. So they've actually had gotten off to a pretty strong start in China, and they've had good growth here in North America as well. And this whole I think what the realization they came to a few years ago, when Ford recommitted to the Lincoln brand, at least for a time, was that they weren't going to be able to compete head on with the Germans, with the German premium brands, trying to build the same kinds of vehicles. That was just a losing battle. I mean, Cadillac's been fighting that battle for 15 years and having limited success. And Lincoln decided the better way to go is to focus on really refining what they had, the products they had, giving them a distinct look from the Fords that they share underpinnings with, and really focusing more on the customer experience and, the whole experience around owning a Lincoln. So they've done things like, the Black Label program, they've got all kinds of concierge services that they offer their customers. They've got pickup and delivery for service visits. So when a car needs to go in for maintenance, they'll come and pick it up and bring it back to you. And they've got the Lincoln chauffeur service that they announced at the New York Auto Show, which has, they piloted it in Miami and San Diego, and they've made some updates to it now as they get ready to expand it. And it's now called Lincoln Personal Driver rather than Chauffeur. But they're trying a bunch of different things that seem to be gaining some traction. And, one of those things now is a subscription service that they're starting. And we've seen some other subscription services from Cadillac and Porsche, and more recently Volvo. Again, Lincoln's taking it a slightly different tack on it. Instead of paying, you still pay a flat monthly fee that, gives you the vehicle and insurance and maintenance and everything. But rather than being able to swap in and out different cars whenever you feel like, you pay by the month. And then you can switch each month if you want, or you can keep the same vehicle for however long you feel like. So you can switch up to once a month. And then, each vehicle is at a different monthly price point. But if you want to drive an MKC one month, and then jump into a Nautilus the next month, or a Navigator, or go into a Continental, you can do that, and they're going to be piloting that starting in early 2018. So it'll be interesting to see how that and these other subscription services catch on.
Yeah, well, it's good that Lincoln is sort of treading its own path. They need to be doing that. They shouldn't try to compete with the Germans. I think that's a surefire way to shoot themselves in the foot. If we're going to use two metaphors back to back, but it's really like what they need to do is they need to define what it means to be a Lincoln owner or a Lincoln driver. And so if it means a high level of concierge service, if it means being able to swap your car, or the ability to pay up to be able to swap your car, or if it means they take care of you like a Lexus dealer. Everybody could learn stuff from Lexus dealers, because that's one of the reasons why Lexus buyers are so loyal, is because they get treated well. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise. You don't treat people like, meat bags with money in their pockets. They will come back and buy your cars, however, uninteresting they are, because I would much rather have a Lincoln, like like a Nautilus versus a Lexus RX, for a variety of reasons, but the Lincoln speaks to me much more. But if I have to go to the Lincoln dealer and they treat me poorly, I would be happy to go and get treated like a king at Lexus. So those are much easier. That's
definitely something Lincoln is trying to do, is make sure they do treat their customers correctly.
Yeah, because I think that even if they hadn't updated the product, there's so much ground to be covered, or so much gain, so many gains to be had by just learning how to treat people better. I think that's sort of an area where you could leave the cars the same, because they're all pretty good. As much as I say that they weren't differentiated enough from Fords, and they're still working on that. They're getting more and more different. The ownership experience and the customer experience is really like that's going to make you buy or not buy, or buy once and come back, or buy once and never come back. So I babbled about that enough now.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to stay on Ford and talk about EV production, or?
Well, let's hit a few of the highlights of the LA Auto Show.
I mean, the biggest highlight was that thing that Chris Bangle introduced.
The red box, or whatever.
The red space Reds. I think it's the Reds. The car's the Reds, right? But the company's Red Space.
Like that. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody hated it, but I thought it was actually really intriguing, and it's a good exercise.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot more vehicles of that type emerging over the next several years, that are targeted at use in various kinds of mobility services. It's going to be a growing segment. And, car makers are going to be experimenting with different form factors for automated vehicles, that take advantage of the fact that you don't have to have, the controls and a lot of other stuff that we traditionally have in vehicles, and let the passengers do something different. But there's also a lot of other stuff coming before we get there. Yeah. Like one of the, Volkswagen made an announcement at LA. They showed, all three of the members of the ID family that they've previously shown, the original hatchback, the bus, the ID Buzz, that we saw in Detroit back in January, and the latest, which is the ID Cross, which is a compact crossover coupe, and all these are all electric. And the ID hatchback is launching in Europe in 2019, and the crossover is launching here in the U.S. in 2020 with available range over 300 miles. Base model is going to be over 200, and should make for a very interesting competitor for Tesla, assuming that they're still in business in 2020.
Well, I mean, that kind of assumes the Volkswagen's still in business too. They got a big settlement I think they're paying out $30 billion.
Yeah, so well, I suspect they'll be around. I mean, they actually have, a fairly decent cash pile and a lot of positive cash flow. They actually bring in more cash than they spend every year, unlike Tesla.
And also, they have stuff they could sell off.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so they have some assets available to them. But the other thing too is the bus, is officially going to be a production model in 2022. So the microbus is back.
Yeah, I'm not convinced. They say things like that at shows, and it's early enough now that they could be like, yeah, we decided not to do that in 6 months.
Well, in this case, I think they will do it because I think, they want a vehicle of this form factor for autonomous mobility. Because the minivan, is I think is going to be a very important form factor for these kinds of services, because it's easy for people to get in and out. And being electric, it makes a lot of sense to use that vehicle. So I think they will build something like this.
Yeah, well, it's funny, all these like startups and new ideas and stuff. They're all reinventing the bus, so we might as well just use a van. But yeah, I agree.
Something that doesn't look just like a box.
Yeah. But it's just got to pick how do you get the most, the most riders into the autonomous car that's a car sharing thing or ride sharing. Anyway, I'm being cynical. But yeah,
that is your job.
Yeah, that's true. Like station wagons, I'm okay with the bus or the van sort of being resurgent. It's especially if we want to talk about the most efficient way to move people and stuff. That's a van.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why, Waymo is, launching their mobility service with Chrysler Pacifica hybrids. It's the right form factor for the job.
I bet Chrysler made him a deal. Maybe not. I don't know.
Not necessarily.
So what else did you see at LA that you were impressed?
Well, at the opposite end of the scale, of course, GM showed the ZR1 convertible. We saw the coupe a couple weeks ago in Dubai, and now they launched the convertible as well. So 216 mile an hour top speed with the top down, not too shabby.
Yeah, I mean the ZR1 in a convertible, like that's a printing press for money. They'll sell every single one of those.
Oh yeah, you can't go wrong.
No, they'll get tucked away in a garage.
Other than the fact that who really needs a 750 horsepower car, but
so this is my complaint about Corvettes though, is even the base one is surprisingly good performance for surprisingly small cash outlay.
Yeah, and compared to other hypercars, at 120 grand. ZR1, I mean, it's not cheap, but, it's not crazy expensive either. So, Infiniti showed off the the second generation QX50, which, in itself, is a fine, mid-size crossover, it adopts, Infiniti's current design language and does it in a pretty nice way. It's a pretty decent looking vehicle. It makes a very nice brown station wagon. But what's really cool about it, though, is the engine that's in this thing. It is the first production application of Infiniti / Nissan's new variable compression engine. So it's a 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder with this fascinating mechanism in the crankcase that enables it to, you've got this linkage that moves the bottom of the connecting rods, so you can vary the compression ratio between 8-to-1 and 14-to-1, and anywhere in between, to get maximum power or maximum efficiency out of the thing. Higher compression ratios give you more efficiency, whereas you can get more power out of a bit lower compression ratio. And looking at the diagrams of this thing, it seems crazy that it works, first of all.
Yeah, I can't picture that in my head. And I've seen illustrations of it. I just can't picture how the linkage works to rotate the connecting rods because it basically varies the static compression ratio by adjusting the stroke, right?
Well, no, the stroke stays the same. It's just that the whole thing, the piston and rod move up and down vertically within the cylinder.
So it basically changes the deck height.
Top dead center and bottom dead center move in tandem. Okay. So that gives, so as you move it up in the cylinder, you get more compression. You move it down, it gets less compression. And, it seems like this mechanism should be adding, tons and tons of weight to the thing. And, all kinds of friction, and it shouldn't work. It certainly shouldn't be able to get 27% better fuel efficiency than the V6 that it replaces, but it does. And talking to the chief engineer, he explained, some of the ideas behind it and why this thing works. First of all, it's only 10 kilograms heavier than a conventional 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo, so that's about 22 pounds. But it's 30 kilos less than a 3.5 liter V6. And the reason why the weight gain is comparatively small is because they were actually able to get rid of the balance shafts in this thing. So you got rid of 2 balance shafts and added this mechanism, so you get only a minor weight gain from it. And the reason why they were able to get rid of the balance shafts is because with this mechanism, as the piston moves up and down in the cylinder, the connecting rods actually have far less movement. They swivel a lot less than they normally do in a conventional engine. And so you get vastly reduced side thrust forces on the piston. So basically the piston and the rod move up and down almost straight in the cylinder most of the time. There's very little side motion. And so you get a lot less vibration and a lot less friction as well. So that both of those contribute, or the friction contributes partially to the fuel economy gain, and then the reduced motion, side to side motion, help with the vibrations, so you can live without the balance shafts. So it's an incredibly clever design.
At first it seems like they've put a lot of like a Rube Goldberg solution to it, because the normal way to vary the compression is to use forced induction. That's essentially what it is. It's a variable compression engine. Mm-hmm. So this way of actually varying the static compression, like moving the whole assembly, I'm sure it's not the first time it's been tried. It's the first time it's made it to production. It seems like it's actually pretty simple and elegant, and has that chance to be reliable for the long term. I wonder where it goes from here. Like, is that one of the measures? Like when we talked with I forget his name, the guy from Mazda, talking about how he still thinks there's a lot left in the
Robert Davis,
right? So is this one of the things that's kind of like a life extender for the internal combustion engine? We just get more and more clever and tricky with it.
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. Infiniti wouldn't talk about what the cost is, but again, because you're getting rid of balance shafts and some other parts, the cost, actually the incremental cost shouldn't be that high compared to, the existing engines. And then, Mazda, of course, has their own solution that achieves some of the same ends, of variable compression with the Skyactiv X that's coming in 2019, excuse me, the 2019 Mazda 3. So, everybody's looking at, how, the goal is, to take things that have traditionally been static, and fixed in an internal combustion engine and make them variable, because, all these static characteristics of the engine mean that it can never be optimized for the entire operating range. There's always parts of the operating range where performance or efficiency is compromised. And so the more you can vary all of these things, now, so we've had variable cam timing and valve lift and things like that for years, and, variable fuel delivery from injection systems. And now, this is, variable compression is kind of the next stage of this, and it's getting us more and more efficiency and allowing engineers to optimize more of the operating range of the engine.
Yeah, I mean, that's where you're going to find the gains. You just optimize it over a wider range instead of an hour sort of window. And
yep.
It's impressive. I hope that you get to drive it. I'm sure you'll get to drive it sooner than I will. So I was going to say, hope you get to drive it sometime soon so we can have a little bit of a report on it. Let's see, what else was at LA? The new Wrangler.
The Wrangler was there. It's still a Wrangler.
I was going to say, it looks like a Wrangler.
Yeah, still looks like a Wrangler, as well it should. On Tuesday, I actually left LA for the day, caught a 6 a.m. flight from LA to San Francisco to go to an event that GM was holding with their team from Cruise Automation, who are developing their production automated driving software. And it's the first time that we've actually been able to get some real exposure to their prototype automated bolts, and talk to Kyle Vogt, the CEO of Cruise, and learned a whole bunch of things about what they're doing on this car. First of all, GM, unlike Ford, has decided that they're going to go all electric with their automated vehicles, and the Bolt is going to be their launch vehicle for their automated mobility service that's going to start in commercial service in 2019, something they announced last week. But it's fascinating that this car has 40 sensors on it. There's 5 LiDAR sensors, 14 cameras, and a whole bunch of radar, including 10 new ultra short range radar sensors, and then 3 computers to control the thing. It's amazing, how much hardware there is in this thing. And we got to go for a ride in it on the streets of San Francisco. And, like Waymo did, they have tablets at each seating position, so you can see what the sensors are seeing, and you can see the paths. It shows you the decision-making process for the driving paths. So you can see, what its current planned path is. And, if it's looking at alternates, it'll show you what those are. So you can see, it's part of what they're doing to try to build trust in the system. So you can look around you and see, oh yeah, there's 2 people crossing the street with dogs, in front of us, from opposite directions. And you can see them right on the screen there, and you can see that cyclist and this truck over here. So I came away pretty confident in the decision-making capabilities of the system. One of the clever things it did when it came upon a double parked truck that was unloading on a side street in San Francisco, the car pulled up behind it, stopped, waited, made sure there's nobody coming from behind or passing. And then it did, what a human would do in the same situation. You pull out a little bit and do a little peek to see if there's anybody coming in the opposite direction. And when it realized there was no, that it was all clear from the opposite direction, then it pulled out and pulled around. The one flaw in the whole system, though, was, kind of the control of the vehicle. So the decision making, I think, was working really well. I was confident in that, but the control refinement, so the steering inputs, braking inputs were harsher than I would expect them to be. And the best analogy to describe them is, if you remember when you first learned how to drive, you tend to turn the steering wheel more than you actually needed to, the first few times, until you learn what the relationship is between, a certain amount of steering angle and speed of turning the wheel and a certain amount of movement of the car. Same thing with the brakes. You tend to, hit the brakes harder than you need to until you learn to, modulate all that. And, so GM needs to get some of their vehicle dynamics engineers working on this more with the Cruise team to kind of smooth it all out, smooth out the control. But other than that, it was working really well.
Well, and I'm assuming, you've worked at an automaker and sort of development. So that last little bit of work, though, seems like it is that control refinement. Like they've done a lot of the other stuff, and now it's how to make it smooth and kind of behave in a way that doesn't alarm anyone who's riding in it.
It's not a trivial problem, but
right.
Compared to the problem of correctly sensing what's going on in its environment and making the right path planning decisions, that's really the harder problem. And then the refinement is something that is a comparatively easier problem, but it's going to take some time and some effort to do that.
So this almost, to me, it came out of a little bit out of nowhere, because I don't follow it as closely as you do, but it seems like we've heard other companies, even Ford, working at this aggressively, and then GM is like, oh yeah, here's our thing. Was this all in house? Are they working with suppliers on a lot of the software? Or are they how much of the development is sort of going on within the halls of GM?
No, it's all in house. Between the GM and now at Cruise Automation. So basically, GM and Cruise followed a similar path. In that they were both developing automated driving capabilities, for a long time internally. And then, over the last year, both of them have acquired or invested in startups, that were focused on the software side of it. And the idea, talking to Doug Parks, who's the VP of autonomous and electric programs at GM, about what it was about Cruise that prompted GM to acquire them is, said, basically it was a smart team, and they wanted to bring in a team that could bring in some of the kind of the Silicon Valley attitude of being able to work more quickly, and iterate quickly through the development process, and make changes faster and get things going. But at the same time, they wanted to combine that with their traditional skills of being able to actually mass manufacture and really validate and test all this stuff and make sure that it's safe, because that's absolutely crucial for everybody doing this, is that these systems have to be safe, and you really have to test the hell out of them. So at the same time that the Cruise guys are developing the software, in California and Arizona and elsewhere, you've got other engineers in Milford and other locations that are putting these autonomous vehicles through their paces. And one of the interesting things as well this year, we saw GM introduce 2 new generations of their Bolt prototypes, autonomous Bolt prototypes. And actually, there's been 3 generations in total in the span of 14 months. After they bought Cruise in the spring of 2016, they put together an initial batch of 50 Bolts, autonomous Bolts, with a first pass at what the sensor suite was that they were looking at using. And then Cruise started working with those, and then they immediately started work on 2 parallel paths. From there, one team was working on a more sophisticated sensor suite, which would be the production intent sensor setup. And when GM announced back in May of this year, I think, or so, April or May, that they were building 130 more bolts in the factory in Orion, Michigan, where the other bolts are built. Those were the cars that they built at that time. And so they had the full sensor suite, and they, again, shipped those off shipped most of those off to Cruise to work with those. And then the other team that was working at the same time in parallel were working on the safety aspects and all the redundancy. And so that was, putting in redundant brake systems, redundant steering systems, redundant compute platforms. And, as soon as they were ready in the summer, that's when, in September, they launched the third generation prototype, which combined the sensors that were on the second generation with the rest of this hardware, and then built another 50 of those. So now, they have 230 prototypes of these three different configurations that they're using to do this development and testing, and going through all the usual durability testing on running through saltwater baths and everything else and rough road conditions that they do with any other vehicle, and making sure that all the hardware holds up.
Yeah, because GM knows a thing or two about all of that stuff that I think is what's missing from some of the other upstarts in the autonomous vehicle space. Like, they have to learn how to make a vehicle and make a vehicle that's going to work in all conditions. Like, a lot of that stuff is sorted out with the sort of long-serving automakers.
Yeah, and that was exactly the reason why that when I talked to Brian Selesky, the CEO of Argo AI, a few months ago, that was the reason he gave for why they opted to go with Ford investing in them instead of taking VC money, is because they wanted to work with a manufacturer that knew how to actually build the vehicles and do all this other stuff, so they could focus on the software side of it. And that's the other announcement that came out last night, I think, at least partly in response to GM's announcements last week, that Ford is is continuing their focus on the production development of their automated car for 2021. But unlike GM, they're not using an existing vehicle to do it for the first generation. They're going straight to a custom designed vehicle for autonomous driving. The Argo team is working on the production software, and the Ford team is working on developing the vehicle, and that's going to be built here in Michigan at the Flat Rock Assembly Plant, which was actually announced back in January by ex-CEO Mark Fields. But they also announced, as part of that, kind of slipped in something in there that, when Fields made his announcement in January, he also said that the Flat Rock plant was going to build Ford's new 300-mile range electric SUV, that program will now actually be built in Mexico instead, at Ford's Cuautitlán assembly plant that currently builds the Fiesta. And they're going to build the electric SUV down there instead, so they have more capacity for autonomous vehicles in Flat Rock.
Yeah, it's all getting rearranged. I saw on Twitter somebody commented, like, what do the suppliers think of this? Because it was, they were, when we were talking about this before we started, there was supposed to be an all new factory in Mexico for the Focus, and then that stopped, and then they were moving the Focus into the existing factory, and then they have now decided they're going to move the Focus to China so they can do the EV thing. Suppliers must be like, you want us to ship the parts where? Just tell us where you want the stuff.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Fortunately, both of those programs are still far enough out that, it shouldn't be too disruptive. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, can throw a monkey wrench into planning for where you're going to produce this stuff, because usually, they try to produce a lot of the parts as close as they can to the assembly line. And, moving the assembly line from Michigan to Mexico that can be pretty disruptive.
Yeah, but I mean, I think too, moving an assembly line from Mexico now to China, China has sort of it's like this double-edged sword. Like, I think there's a lot of companies that want to get in there and sort of crack the Chinese market, right? Because that's such a potential growth market. Even as every now and then we say, oh, it's heating up, oh, it's cooling off. Once you get in there and you get some learning on the ground, I think there's a ton of suppliers there already. But it's just a good opportunity So I wouldn't see it necessarily as a bad thing if I were a supplier and the Ford said, "Hey, the car that you're gonna supply us parts with, and we're gonna build this industrial park, so you're right there for our just-in-time system. We're now going to China." I'd kind of be like, okay.
Actually, I mean, the Focus is already built in China anyway. So
That's true. Yeah.
They already, currently they build Focus in the U.S., in China, and in Europe. And so basically they're just dropping North American production of Focus. And,
that's okay because we've dropped North American buying.
Well, and that's exactly why, because, sales of small cars have declined so much that they can't justify building them here. So they'll go down to 2 plants, one in Europe, one in China, and bring over U.S. market cars from China.
So how expensive are these gonna wind up being? Like talking about, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but coming back to this Bolt, it has like 5 LiDAR sensors on it.
Last week, Dan Amon, who was there, he said that currently the LiDAR setup costs about $20,000, and by the time they go into commercial operation in 19, it should be down to about half that, down to about $10,000. Because also last week or the week before, Velodyne announced that they're ramping up production of their next generation sensor, which is what GM's going to be using on the first generation of the Bolts. So that that cost will come down. But the thing is, GM's not going to be selling these, so it doesn't matter how much they cost, really, because you're not going to be able to buy an autonomous car, and most other manufacturers aren't going to be selling them to consumers. They're only going to be available through ride-hailing services.
Yeah, and that's smart.
Yeah,
I can only imagine the chaos.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of issues, which we can get into another time. For why this is happening. But yeah, I mean, don't expect that you'll be able to buy an autonomous car anytime in the foreseeable future, or maybe never.
So did it leave you impressed? Like, how does GM's effort at an autonomous program stack up to the other automaker efforts you've checked out?
I mean, the demo with the Bolt was by far the most complex environment that I've been in an autonomous vehicle. Most of the other demos I've been in, were not nearly as crowded. There was not as much stuff going on. They were taking place on a test track like we did with Waymo, where it was all simulated. I mean, this was in a real environment where these things are going to be operating, and the car worked. So I was impressed. I'm the issues, that I saw with some of the control refinement, I'm confident that those will be resolved, fairly soon. And then, the other stuff is just, it's working fine just now. So, I think they're in as good shape as anybody.
Well, when the robot overlords come,
they will be kind to me because I was nice to them.
Yeah. And hey, was this the first time you got in Car and Driver?
No, I've done a couple articles for them in the past.
Good for you.
Yeah.
It was my holy grail when I was 12 years old. I wanted to be a car writer. It's like, I want to write for Car and Driver.
Yeah, this is about the second or third time I've been in there. So yeah, that was fun. Cause they weren't able to get anybody into this event. It was a pretty small, group of people that were there, only about 15 people. At that event. So I felt lucky to be there. So let's see, what else did we have? The Leaf. Yeah, the Leaf. There's a new Nissan Leaf.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that, I find hilarious is the Tesla Model 3 is supposed to be like, it's supposed to drive on water, right? It's supposed to be like, this is the car that's going to take EVs mainstream. It's like, nah, you know what? There's been an affordable mainstream EV for a very long time now. It's been made by Nissan. It's been very quiet, sort of, about
and it's actually the best-selling EV in the world. They've sold
really good.
Nissan has sold a lot more Leafs than Tesla has sold of all of their cars to date. So far they've sold about 290,000 of them globally, and about 114,000 in the US. So, it's doing all right.
Yeah.
And this new one is definitely a significant upgrade. it's based on a lot of the same structure from the current car, but the styling is much more mainstream now. It looks like other Nissan vehicles, and the interior is less weird. It works. It looks more like other Nissan vehicles, and it's the first Nissan to hit production with Android Auto and CarPlay support. Saying that for about the third or fourth time tonight.
Those are important to you for some reason.
Well, they are. It's I think those are important features to have. But no, driving it, it felt good. It drives well. Like other EVs, it's got the strong get up off the line. That instant low end torque. It's not as quick as Model 3 is going to be in terms of total acceleration, but it's got more than enough performance for, almost every driver.
Yeah.
And 147 horsepower now, 236 foot-pounds of torque, I think. It'll do just fine. I think most people will be absolutely satisfied with this thing. The only thing that some people might be concerned about is, compared to the Bolt, the range is quite a bit lower. It's about 150 miles, whereas the Bolt is, 238. But there is going to be another version with a larger battery and over 200 miles of range coming in 2018. And even this one, for most people, 150 miles is probably going to be fine.
That's like,
and it supports DC fast charging and other stuff. So I think it'll do great,
especially for the price. Like the last time I checked, you've taken federal and local or federal and state tax credits. You can get a Leaf down close to $20,000.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the other thing. The starting price for the Leaf, is under 30,000. It's about with delivery charge, it's 30,680. Or no, sorry, that was the 17. So it's 29,900 is the starting price for the 2018 Leaf for the S model, and that gets you 6.6 kilowatt charger and e-pedal and same range as the most expensive one, and even the most expensive Leaf, the loaded SL, is still only 36,000. So it's still cheaper than a Bolt. And that's part of the reason why they opted for the smaller battery, because the battery is the single biggest cost in an EV. So they went with the 40 kilowatt hour battery, and that got them a sub $30,000 sticker price. And with incentives, for at least for as long as the federal incentive stays around, that's that's $7,500 off there. And if you live in California, that's another $5,000 off. So you can get it under $20,000 new, which is a pretty good deal.
Yeah, especially it fulfills all the promises that everybody wants out of the Model S and other cars of that ilk, and it's been doing it for a while, and that's why. It sort of makes me shake my head. Like it doesn't have the cachet for sure, but it's got a lot of the teething stuff really figured out. You don't hear about issues with the Leaf. They're not a lemon. It just does its thing. And 150 miles of range is, like you said, while it's not as good as something like the Bolt, it's plenty. You'd be able to do a daily commute with that. I personally would be able to do a daily commute with that, and my commute is long, like much longer than average. So
right, and this is almost double the range of of what it was when the car launched in 2010. It was like 80 miles then. And it's funny. On Sunday I showed the Leaf to someone who currently owns a Tesla Model X. And she is not at all happy with the Tesla. I mean, they've had a ton of problems with that thing. And, she wants to get another EV, but has no intention of buying another Tesla. And she really liked the Leaf, and there's a pretty decent chance that she might end up buying one.
So is the Leaf smaller, though? It's not as big as the Model X.
Oh, no, it's a lot smaller than the Model X. It's a C segment car. It's comparable in size to a Focus or a Civic. So yeah, it's got about 92 cubic feet of interior space. 24 cubic feet of cargo space. So, it's got plenty, it's got plenty of room in there.
Yeah. I mean, 24 feet of cargo space is actually pretty great. And that's, I guess, the one thing is like, it's not as big as some of the other EV options out there. But I mean, I don't know. I've always been impressed by the Leaf, and it's sort of like this dark horse that it goes back to my Mazda problem at the beginning of the show. Like, I need to remember it more.
Yeah, well, there's another thing too about the new Leaf that they have added in that actually adds to the value proposition. The charging cable that comes with, all EVs come with a charging cable, but for this Leaf, they've added what the first level 1 and level 2 charging cable. So, up until now, the charging cables that came with EVs, you could plug them into a standard 110 volt outlet and, it would charge, it might take you a couple of days to do a full charge on the battery. And if you wanted faster 240 volt charging at home, you would have to go buy a level 2 charger, a 240 volt charger, and get an electrician to install it in your garage or on the side of your house. So you could plug it in and charge much faster. Now the Leaf has this new cable, charging cable that actually has the level 2 charging management stuff built right into the cable. So all you need actually is just a standard 240 volt NEMA dryer outlet in your garage. So if you've got access to an existing 240 volt outlet in your house or in your garage, you can just plug the cable in directly to that and get the faster charging. You don't have to spend $500 or $600 on an additional wall charger to get that faster charging.
See, that's smart.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also has ProPilot Assist, which is it's like autopilot, but it works, and it doesn't pull you into guardrails the way the Model X does.
Can we talk about how stupid the commercials are for ProPilot Assist with the Star Wars tie-up? Because I
haven't seen those.
Yeah, don't. Yeah, they're dumb. But,
okay.
I mean, they have a car called the Rogue, so they want it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, I think we covered everything on our list, and we didn't have a question that I could see. So I think that's about it for this episode.
And since I'm not traveling anymore until I head to CES in January, we should be able to do these more consistently for the next few weeks. We
should, especially because I got told that I needed to use up some vacation time that I can't roll over, and they can't give me money for it. So,
excellent.
I took a couple weeks off, which is coming up. So we should not have a problem coordinating.
Maybe we can even stockpile a couple episodes for when we're traveling. When I'm traveling,
yeah. I mean, we can just ramble about some bullshit.
Yeah,
just make an episode.
And we're going to have a couple of special guests coming up in the next couple of weeks as well, which hopefully you'll enjoy.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. You know where to drop us a note. If you don't, it's just hit us up on Twitter at Wheelbearingscast. No vowels except for the A in cast. We're on Facebook as Wheelbearing Media. I'm Boston_Auto. Sam yours, Sam Abul Samid. I think we're covered. People know where to get in touch with us, right? Yeah, and if you came to the show after seeing me on Twit last week, hope you enjoyed it, and hope you keep coming back and subscribe, and just subscribe so it shows up in your feed every week, and we can count the downloads. All right, thanks for listening. All right, bye.
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.